School of our Divine Infinite Being, Central Doctrine. The spirits of nature, mastery of the demonic forces in the natural world of generation, Hecate, Queen of Daemons, and Kali.
For the whole air is full of souls, and this is filled with them. The water and the earth and the entire cosmos is made to have soul in every part by the gods who occupy the places. Iamblichus, De Mysteriis, Book 8, Section 3. May the waters, the mothers, cleanse us. May they who purify with butter purify us. May they, the rivers, keep us in safety. Atharva Veda, 624-3, 1500 BCE.
Across various indigenous cultures, the concept of nature as a living, spiritual entity forms the cornerstone of many traditional belief systems. This understanding is especially pronounced in Vietnamese goddess worship, where the natural landscape is not merely a setting for human activity, but a realm brimming with spiritual life and agency. In Vietnam, rivers, forests, and mountains are viewed not just as physical entities, but as vibrant ecosystems inhabited by divine spirits that command respect and veneration. This reverence for nature as a dynamic spiritual entity is not unique to Vietnam, but resonates across diverse religious communities and indigenous cultures globally. From the sacred groves of India, where spirits are believed to reside in the trees and plants, to the Native American traditions that honor the spirits of animals and geographical features as integral parts of their cosmology. The idea of an animated, sacred nature is a universal theme. These cultures share a common understanding that nature is a living network of spiritual forces, each component playing a crucial role in the spiritual and physical health of the ecosystem. Such beliefs foster a profound respect and stewardship for the environment, viewing it as a living partner rather than a resource to be exploited. Vietnamese goddess worship integrates a deep-seated animism that elevates every natural element to a spiritual status. Each tree, stone, and stream is considered alive, governed by its own spirit or deity. This belief extends to larger natural features, where major rivers and mountains are seen as the abodes of powerful goddesses who oversee and influence the lives of the communities that depend on them. These natural deities are integral to the Vietnamese spiritual landscape, playing active roles in the socio-religious fabric of the community. Such veneration is evident in rituals and festivals dedicated to these goddesses, where prayers and offerings are made to appease the spirits of the land, seeking their blessing for fertility, prosperity, and protection. The practice of worshiping these goddesses reflects a reciprocal relationship between the people and their environment, rooted in a philosophy of harmony and balance. It acknowledges the potent forces of nature and the need to maintain a respectful and sustainable interaction with the world. This strong connection with nature's spiritual dimension provides an insightful framework for delving into philosophical discussions about the soul's journey through the material world. Similar to how the Vietnamese view their landscape as imbued with divine presence, ancient Greek philosophy also explores the concepts of daemons, spiritual entities that interact with the material realm. These daemons, often considered divine or semi-divine beings, play a crucial role in influencing and guiding human affairs and the soul's descent into matter. This cultural and philosophical perspective on nature's divinity and the presence of daemons establishes a foundational context for discussing the spiritual dynamics of the soul as it engages with the physical world.
The soul is depicted as descending into matter to serve the body, our rushing vessel. As described by Cynesis, this is actually a twofold descent, in which the soul first serves the body and then becomes enslaved to it. This enslavement or submersion into matter is also referred to as a kind of intoxication, wherein the soul is said to be drunk on material distractions and thus needs to sober up and reflect on its divine origins and the nature of the divine world. Ruth Major Kick, The Platonic Soul of Theurgy, Chaldean Oracles. But the soul which verges downward drags with it the signs of bonds and punishments, is weighed down with the conflicts of material spirits, is possessed by irregular troubles of matter, and appears to have placed before itself the authority of generative daemones. Iamblichus. De Mysteriis.
In the Iamblichean Platonic view, the soul's descent into matter is not merely a physical act, but a profoundly metaphysical journey laden with challenges, guided and influenced by daemons, or intermediary intelligences. As Ruth Majercik highlights, this descent is a dual process. The soul initially serves the body, acting as its divine steward, and then risks becoming enslaved to the material plane. This enslavement represents a forgetfulness of the soul's true nature and its divine origin, a condition that the Chaldean Oracles poetically describe as a kind of intoxication. The soul, captivated by the allure of sensory experiences and the immediacy of physical existence, becomes drunk on materiality. To reverse this process, the soul must sober up, rekindling its awareness of the divine world and seeking a return to its celestial source.
Daemon or demon, ancient Greek, daimon, godlike, power, fate, originally referred to lesser deity or guiding spirits such as the daemones of ancient Greek religion and mythology, and of later Hellenistic religion and philosophy. The word is derived from Proto-Indo-European daimon, provider, divider of fortunes or destinies, from the root da, to divide. Wikipedia.
The presence and immense influence of daemons form one of humanity's oldest and most profound connections, rooted in the earliest philosophical and religious traditions. In pre-Homeric Greek religion, before 700 BCE, daemons were abstract forces representing divine will, moral conscience, or fate, binding the human and the divine realms. Hesiod, in Works and Days, describes them as spirits of the Golden Age, protectors and guides for humanity. These early depictions set the stage for the daemon's evolution as both a personal and cosmic force. As we have taught earlier concerning the Ka as the vital force and the Ba as the unique spiritual essence, from Egyptian religious thought, the daemon similarly functions as mediators between the earthly and divine realms. Together, they articulate the soul's ability to transverse these dimensions, a role that mirrors the intermediary nature of the Greek daemon. This shared framework highlights a profound connection made between these ancient cultures from the pre-Homeric traditions, the recognition of unseen forces, guiding the soul's journey and its alignment with both cosmic and individual destiny. Similarly, Mesopotamian mythology introduces protective spirits, like the Shidu, Lamassu, and Udug, which serve as guardians and messengers of divine will. These beings, sometimes benevolent and other times malevolent, embodied the dual nature of existence and foreshadowed the sometimes ambiguous role of the Greek daemon. These traditions, from the earliest Greek to the more ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian, reveal a shared human preoccupation with unseen forces that influence and guide the course of life. By the time of the Orphic and Pythagorean traditions, the daemon had become deeply entwined with the soul's journey in cosmic order. The Orphics emphasized the daemon's role in the soul's reincarnation and ultimate liberation, while Pythagoras described daemons as personal guides, leading humans towards higher knowledge and virtue. These teachings enriched the daemon's philosophical significance, preparing the ground for its integration into the Platonic worldview. In Platonic philosophy, the daemon was elevated to a central metaphysical concept. Plato, in the Symposium, describes daemons as intermediaries between gods and humans, serving as conduits that unite the divine and the mortal in a profound exchange of wisdom, purpose, and energy. They are portrayed as guiding forces, akin to a moral conscience or a personal genius, which later influenced the Roman notion of the genius. In the Timaeus, daemons are cosmic agents that maintain universal harmony, highlighting the role in the interplay of divine order and human experience.
The bonds or generation from which souls had to be cleansed were personified by Iamblichus as daemones, meditating entities that tied souls to their bodies. In the De Mysteriis, Iamblichus says, one must assign to daemons the jurisdiction over generative powers, as well as the responsibility over nature and of binding souls to bodies. Iamblichus's theurgical Platonism was locative in a highly sophisticated way. The demonic was not an external evil but a condition of the embodied soul, a felix culpa without which the soul could not participate in cosmogenesis. Gregory Shaw, Theurgy and the Soul, the Neoplatonism of Iamblichus.
In Iamblichean theurgy, daemons play a pivotal role in this drama of incarnation and eventual liberation. Acting as mediators between the divine and human realms, daemons guide the soul's descent into embodiment, ensuring that it aligns with cosmic law and its individual destiny, or eudaimonia. According to Iamblichus, these demonic forces are not merely passive observers, but active participants in shaping the soul's earthly journey. They orchestrate circumstances, challenges, and opportunities that help the soul fulfill its purpose within the material realm. At the same time, they guard against the soul's complete dissolution into material distractions, providing subtle reminders of its divine heritage. However, daemons are also part of the soul's test. Their influence can be ambiguous, reflecting the dual nature of existence. While they may inspire the soul towards higher reflection and divine contemplation, they can also embody the chaotic and binding forces of the material world, serving as agents of the soul's intoxication. In this way, the daemons are integral to the soul's learning process, embodying both the forces that bind it to the material plane and those that call it back to the divine. Through their guidance, the soul experiences the full spectrum of material existence, learning to navigate between the perils of enslavement and the promise of liberation. Iamblichus views this dynamic interplay as essential for the soul's ultimate ascent. The descent into matter and the subsequent intoxication are not merely punishments or failings but opportunities for growth and self-realization. By wrestling with materiality and reflecting on its divine origins, the soul achieves a deeper understanding of its nature and its place within the cosmos. The process of sober reflection, described by Magaric, involves theurgy, a sacred practice that allows the soul to re-establish contact with the divine hierarchy. Theurgical rituals, guided by daemonic intelligences, facilitate the soul's remembrance of its true essence and reintegration with the divine world. In this framework, the soul's journey is both cyclic and teleological. It descends into matter to experience the multiplicity of existence, and ascends again to achieve unity with the divine. Daemons, as mediators of this process, ensure that the soul's journey is not aimless, but imbued with purpose and meaning. They illuminate the soul's path, whether through the trials of material intoxication or the revelations of divine illumination, ultimately guiding it towards its celestial home. Thus, the soul's descent and ascent are not opposing forces, but interwoven aspects of a single cosmic rhythm, orchestrated by daemonic forces in harmony with the divine order.
Iamblichus maintains that daemons unfold the will of the demiurge into material manifestation and thus reveal its divine signatures, synthemata, in nature. According to Iamblichus's theurgical itinerary, the human soul materializes, alienated and mortal must, learn to embrace its alienated and mortal condition as a form of demiurgic activity. By ritually entering this demiurgy, the soul transforms its alienation and mortality into theurgy. The embodied soul becomes an icon of divinity. Gregory Shaw, Honoring the Daemonic in Iamblichean Theurgy.
Iamblichus's concept of the soul's journey cannot be fully understood without appreciating the indispensable role of daemons. As intermediaries between the divine and human realms, daemons serve as cosmic guides, weaving the threads of the demiurge's will into the fabric of material existence. The descent of the soul into matter is not random, but meticulously orchestrated by these intelligences, ensuring that the soul encounters the precise conditions, relationships, and challenges necessary for its growth and ultimate ascent. Central to the daemons' function is their dual nature as both facilitators and challengers. While they reveal the synthemata, the divine signatures that illuminate the path of theurgy, they also embody the forces of material attachment that test the soul's discernment. In this way, they are both the guardians of the divine order and the architects of the soul's trials. These trials, though often perceived as obstacles, are in fact vital opportunities for the soul to confront its own limitations, awaken its latent divinity, and recognize the interconnectedness of all existence. The process of intoxication, described by the Chaldean Oracles, a condition wherein the soul becomes drunk on material distractions, is not merely a passive state, but one actively mediated by the daemons. They oversee the soul's immersion in sensory experiences, drawing it into the depths of matter, where it must wrestle with its own forgetfulness. However, even in this state of apparent submersion, the daemons leave clues, symbols, synchronicities, and moments of insight that act as subtle reminders of the soul's divine heritage. This influence, while at times obscured by the weight of materiality, remains an ever-present thread connecting the soul to the higher realms. In the Iamblichean framework, the daemons also play a transformative role in theurgy. Through ritual and sacred engagement, the soul invokes these intermediary powers, aligning itself with the divine hierarchy they represent. The daemons become the soul's allies in navigating the complexities of existence, offering both protection and revelation. By engaging with them ritually, the soul learns to interpret the sunthemata not just as abstract symbols, but as living embodiments of divine will. Each theurgical act becomes a collaborative effort between the human and the daemonic, a moment where the barriers between mortal and divine dissolve. Yet the daemon's role is not purely beneficent. They are bound to the dual nature of existence and reflect the ambiguity of the material plane. While some daemons inspire the soul towards reflection and divine contemplation, others are agents of binding, embodying the generative forces that ties the soul to the body. These binding daemons, as described by Iamblichus, oversee the bonds of generation, the web of physicality that the soul must ultimately transcend. In this way, the daemons mirror the soul's own inner struggle, acting as both adversaries and guides, whose challenges are necessary for the soul's awakening. Through their influence, the soul experiences the fullness of material existence, the joys and pains, the attachments and liberations, the darkness and illumination. The daemons orchestrate a kind of cosmic symphony, where every note, whether harmonious or discordant, contributes to the soul's journey towards self-realization. The descent into matter, with all its trials and intoxications, becomes a crucible through which the soul discovers its true nature. The ascent, guided by theurgical practices, is not merely a return to the divine, but a deepened reintegration, where the soul carries with it the wisdom gained through its mortal experience. Very much as in the Eastern systems we have divulged earlier, they are both sattva and tamas, drawing us towards divinity and the depths of mortality simultaneously. For Iamblichus, this interplay of descent and ascent, intoxication and sobriety, is the essence of the daemonic role. The daemons do not simply guide the soul, they actively participate in its transformation. By mediating between the mortal and the divine, they ensure that the soul's journey is neither aimless nor stagnant, but a purposeful movement towards cosmic unity. Their presence is woven into every stage of the soul's journey, from its initial immersion in matter to its ultimate reintegration with the divine world. Ultimately, the daemons embody the paradoxical nature of the cosmos itself, both binding and liberating, challenging and inspiring, earthly and divine. They are the soul's constant companions, shaping its journey with both care and rigor. Through their guidance, the soul transforms its mortal condition into a sacred vessel of divinity, reclaiming its celestial origins and fulfilling its destiny as an icon of the divine within the cosmic order.
In accord with this same essence, then, fate is interwoven with providence, and in reality, fate is providence, is established from it and around it. Iamblichus, Stobaeus's Anthologium. Embodied life could be experienced as a bondage to fate, or as an opportunity to live under divine providence, depending on how the soul used its powers. For Iamblichus, providence, pronoia, and fate, hemermony, were functional terms describing the soul's experience of one divine law, salvific for those who obeyed and embodied it, oppressive to those who resisted it. Gregory Shaw, Theurgy and the Soul.
We have taught the seeker of the personal daemon and its relation to the divine double, interwoven at every point of the cosmic horizon with the entire cosmos. Iamblichus emphasizes the personal daemon as the crucial intermediary in navigating the complex interplay of fate, haemormene, and providence, pronoia. This personal guiding spirit is not merely a passive overseer, but an active participant in shaping the soul's journey. Iamblichus writes, "Each of us has a personal daemon, who presides over the ordering of our life, and through whom the soul is joined to the gods." De Mysteriis 9:7. This daemonic connection is the thread that binds the soul to the divine, enabling it to transcend the deterministic chains of fate and align itself with the higher order of providence. Fate, in the Iamblichean worldview, represents the binding forces of material causality, the web of generative and natural laws that govern the physical plane. Providence, on the other hand, signifies the divine will, a transcendent and purposeful order that seeks the ultimate good of all beings. While fate operates within the constraints of time and matter, providence exists beyond them, encompassing the entirety of the cosmic order. This is the great interplay of chronos and aeon, chronological time, and the eternal infinite now. The personal daemon acts as the soul's liaison between these two realms, mediating the interplay of necessity and freedom. Engaging the daemonic forces through theurgical practices is the means by which the soul can elevate its experience from the deterministic plane of fate to the liberating realm of providence. Iamblichus explains that through ritual, contemplation, and the invocation of daemons, the soul participates in the divine hierarchy, transforming its relationship to the forces that shape its existence. The personal daemon, as the closest divine intermediary, facilitates this transformation by revealing the deeper patterns and intentions of providence within the apparent randomness of fate. This transformation is not merely symbolic, but deeply practical. By aligning with the personal daemon, the soul gains insights into the divine signatures, santamata, within its life circumstances. These signatures illuminate how the challenges and constraints of fate are in fact opportunities for growth and divine realization. As Iamblichus describes, fate and providence are not opposed, but are one and the same. The former is the divine will perceived from below, the latter from above. De Mysteriis 9:10. The shift from fate to providence is thus a shift in perspective, facilitated by the daemonic forces that guide the soul towards a higher understanding of its experiences. Theurgical engagement with the daemons enables the soul to actively participate in this transformation. Through their guidance, the soul learns to navigate the binding forces of fate, not as a prisoner, but as a co-creator within the divine. Each theurgical act becomes a moment of alignment, where the soul, in collaboration with its personal daemon, reshapes its destiny to reflect the higher intentions of providence. In this way, the soul's journey is not a passive unfolding, but an active, dynamic process of divine integration. Ultimately, the personal daemon reveals that fate and providence are two aspects of the same divine reality. By engaging with the daemonic forces, the soul awakens to its role within the cosmic order, transforming the trials of material existence into pathways of divine ascent. The personal daemon thus serves as both a guide and a partner in this sacred journey, ensuring that the soul's descent into matter and its subsequent ascent towards the divine are imbued with purpose and meaning.
Most of the duties late philosophical and mystic literature assigned to Hecate portrayed her as the intermediary between the sensible and intelligible realms, at whose discretion passage from one to the other was facilitated. She, Hecate, receives the noetic forms or ideas and brings them forth anew for use in structuring, indeed creating the physical world. The role of the first intellect is to emit the ideas. Hecate is involved with nurturing, regenerating, and moving those ideas towards the sensible world. Sarah Iles Johnston, Hecate Sotiera. According to the oracles, Hecate was queen of the daemones, and as such, she personified all the powers of nature and matter. Louis explains, the Chaldean Hecate encountered the human souls in forms always adequate to their internal condition. For those sunk in the body, she was necessity. For the erring, demonic temptation. For the renegade, a curse. For those who recalled their divine nature, a guide. And for those who returned home, grace. Hecate was a mirror of the embodied soul, reflecting the soul's experience of matter and its own internal condition. Gregory Shaw, Theurgy and the Soul.
The goddess Hecate stands at the pinnacle of the daemonic hierarchy as the anima mundi, the divine feminine womb and the cosmic soul of the universe. She is revered as the queen of daemons and the supreme mediator between the divine and mortal realms. At once, she is also, like the moon, a pure reflection of the human soul. In the Chaldean Oracles, she is described as the cosmic force that bridges opposites, harmonizing the transcendent and immanent aspects of existence. The oracles state, "For the goddess is the connecting link of the all, binding all the ethereal and heavenly with the earthly and material." Chaldean Oracles, Fragment 50. This positions Hecate as the central figure through which divine influence flows into the world, and through which souls can ascend back to their celestial origins. As a liminal figure, Hecate governs the threshold of existence, places where the material and divine intersect. She is the embodiment of the daemonic essence, which is neither entirely mortal nor fully divine, but operates as a mediator that spans both realms. Her triple form, often associated with crossroads, symbolizes her all-encompassing nature and her ability to oversee and guide the soul's journey through the complexities of the cosmos. At these intersections, Hecate, as the mistress of transitions, facilitates the soul's movement between states of being, whether from ignorance to knowledge, from bondage to freedom, or from fate to providence. Gregory Shaw, in Theurgy and the Soul, the Neoplatonism of Iamblichus, notes that Hecate occupies a pivotal role in theurgical practices, serving as the source of sunthomata, the divine signatures that guide practitioners towards the divine. Shaw writes, "Hecate presides over theurgical ascent, ensuring that the soul remains aligned with the divine order while navigating the trials of embodiment. She is the figure who maintains cosmic balance, the intermediary through which the soul finds its way back to the gods. Her role as the Queen of Daemons makes her the ultimate channel for divine energies, orchestrating the interplay between the descent and ascending forces within the cosmos. In her role as mediator, Hecate not only oversees the daemons, but also empowers them as instruments of her will. She ensures that the trials imposed by the daemons, both the binding forces of fate and the liberating impulse of providence, serve the ultimate purpose of divine realization. Her association with both the higher celestial realms and the chthonic underworld reflects her mastery over all aspects of existence. The oracles further emphasize her pivotal role, the more true Hecate, who is seated above the material triad, eternally brings the heavenly fire into order." Chaldean Oracles, Fragment 51. Here Hecate is revealed as the force that governs the cosmic rhythms, ensuring that the daemonic forces operate in alignment with the divine will.
Having adopted Hecate as its savior goddess and emphasized the positive and transmissive or mediating aspects of her traditional personality, the Chaldean system was left to account for her less desirable qualities. One of these, ironically, had grown from the very role of mediator that made Hecate attractive in the first place. Hecate long had been the queen of daemons, meditating entities, but some of these demons had become increasingly dangerous. Physis stood ready. As the lower half of the soul, and thus closely tied to Hecate, she could take charge of the deceitful, distrustful daemons, whose power, in any case, was imagined stemming from the Hylic word that Physis permeated. Hecate herself retained control of the good daemons, or mediators, the Symbala synthemata that aided men seeking salvation. In effect, the traditional Hecate became two goddesses in the Chaldean system, the celestial Hecate, soul, and the earthly Physis. Sarah Iles Johnston, Hecate Sotera.
In the Chaldean system, Hecate was elevated as the supreme mediator between realms, embodying the unity of opposites and guiding the soul through its cosmic journey. However, her multifaceted nature required an outlet for aspects of her being that could not be reconciled within her celestial archetype. Traditionally, Physis served as the earthly counterpart to Hecate, governing the daemonic forces tied to the material world. Yet in our system, the goddess Kali replaces Physis in this role, embodying not only the transformative power of destruction, but also the nurturing potential of creation. Kali, like Physis, stands as a manifestation of the lower half of the soul, yet her role transcends Physis's boundaries by fully integrating destruction as a sacred purifying force. Shambhavi Chopra offers a definition strikingly similar to that assigned to Hecate for the role of Kali in Yogic Secrets of the Dark Goddess. Should we need her help, Kali is ever beneficent, stepping into the spectrum of the canvas herself, guiding our innate forces to deepen and flourish of its ongoing painting. What you ask of her, she will give, only to step back and applaud the freedom of creativity. If you request her dark secrets, through negative manifestations, she offers a dark painting, using colors of deep anguish, reflecting the anguish of our own souls. As Hans Louis, a classicist scholar mentioned by Shaw, stated, the Chaldean Hecate encountered the human soul in forms always adequate to their internal condition. For those sunk in the body, she was necessity. For the erring, demonic temptation. For the renegade, a curse. For those who recalled their divine nature, a guide. And for those who returned home, grace. This strikingly similar definition is astounding. When considering Physis, Sarah Lyles Johnston comments, Physis stood ready as the lower half of the soul, and thus closely tied to Hecate. She could take charge of the deceitful, distrustful demons, whose power, in any case, was imagined stemming from the Hylic world that Physis permeated. In effect, the traditional Hecate became two goddesses in the Chaldean system, the celestial Hecate soul and the earthly Physis. Here we have an incredible vision of this dual-featured goddess, both the anima mundi, Hecate, and Physis, who are easily interchangeable with the definition of Hecate Kali within the school of our divine infinite being. Kali's fierce and dynamic energy redefines the role of Physis in the Chaldean framework to a more dynamic force. While Physis was seen as permeating the Hylic world, sensory world of matter, and managing deceitful daemons, Kali assumes control of these forces with the explicit purpose of transformation and liberation. Unlike Physis, however, Kali does not merely govern or contain demonic forces. She utterly annihilates those that become out of control. Her role as the destroyer of illusions and chaotic energies make her an essential force in the preservation of the cosmic balance. These destructive acts, although demonstrations of divine wrath, are sacred interventions that purify and renew the cosmos, ensuring that the demonic realm serves its intended purpose as a bridge, not a barrier, to divine ascent. The demonic forces represent a duality within the cosmos. They can guide the soul to enlightenment, or if corrupted, bind it to the illusion of material existence. While Hecate, as anima mundi and cosmic soul, maintains dominion over the good daemons, those that transmit divine symbolia and synthemata to the soul, Kali descends into the depths of chaos to confront the corrupt and dangerous daemons. Her unparalleled ferocity and divine authority leaves no space for malevolence to fester. In this way, Kali ensures that even the darkest and most destructive forces ultimately serve the higher purpose of the soul's transformative liberation. As Gregory Shaw observes in Theurgy and the Soul, Hecate operates as the great reconciler, harmonizing the transcendent and immanent. This aligns seamlessly with Kali's dual role in cosmic balance, as she not only destroys but also births anew, echoing the regenerative aspects attributed to Hecate. Both goddesses stand as liminal figures, overseeing thresholds and transitions, whether in the form of cosmic ascent, spiritual awakening, or the annihilation of ignorance. Yet, where Hecate reconciles and mediates, Kali wields the power to eradicate and cleanse. This partnership creates a divine synergy in which Hecate's wisdom and Kali's ferocity work together to maintain cosmic order. The Chaldean Oracles describe Hecate as the connecting link of the all, binding all the ethereal and heavenly with the earthly and material. Fragment 50. In our understanding, Kali amplifies this connection by embodying the energy required to dissolve and reshape the boundaries of existence. Her destructive force is not indiscriminate. It is directed precisely at the forces that obstruct the soul's journey. In myths and rituals, Kali is often depicted slaying demons that embody chaos, greed, and ignorance, acts that symbolize her ultimate role in dissolving the attachments and delusions that hinder spiritual growth. Kali's unparalleled power to destroy, combined with her nurturing aspect, ensures that the demonic realm remains a tool for enlightenment rather than entrapment. When daemons threaten to spiral out of control, it is Kali who intervenes, wielding her cosmic sword to sever the ties of corruption and restore balance. Her ability to annihilate these forces serves as a reminder that destruction is not the end, but a necessary step in renewal and liberation. Together, Hecate and Kali form a divine continuum, Hecate as the celestial mediator, and Kali as the transformative force in the deepest material world. This synthesis not only preserves but strengthens in the Chaldean vision of cosmic ascent, ensuring that the soul's trials are infused with divine purpose and guided by both goddesses' unyielding light and might. As the queen of daemons and the cosmic force that governs transitions, Hecate remains indispensable in the soul's journey. Yet it is Kali, in her fearless embrace of chaos and renewal, who completes the circuit of divine mediation. Through their combined presence, the sacred dance of descent and ascent unfolds, illuminating the soul's path to divine realization. Following the Shakta vision of the cosmos, Hecate, although ruling the auspicious demonic forces, can be envisioned as an emanation of Ma Kali. As stated in the Kalika Purana, all goddesses are but manifestations of Ma Kali, the ultimate reality. In this vision, Hecate is perceived as a higher aspect of Kali, rather than Physis being a lower aspect of Hecate. Hecate, the cosmic soul, the anima mundi, emanates from the darkness of the womb of space, embodying Ma Kali's dynamic energy and the highest aspects of the Devi, akin to Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. The highest emanation of Devi is Sattva Guna in the Devi Bhagavatam. In the ritual practice of our school, we use this combined goddess, Hecate Kali, when invoking the Okima, a spherical self-boundary that mirrors the cosmic horizon in the body of the goddess, where all invoked gods, goddesses, divine archetypes, forms, and demonic forces enter with their perfecting natures. They pass through the divinatory presence of Hecate and the cleansing power of the mother goddess Kali to activate ecstatic union with the practicing theurgist. The demonic forces are most eloquently presented amongst the Greek personifications. Greek personifications of daemons significantly influenced the development of philosophy by providing a framework for understanding the relationship between the divine and human, the material and spiritual, and the ethical and cosmological. They served as both metaphysical and practical symbols for exploring the ascent of the soul, moral guidance, and the pursuit of wisdom. Although Iamblichus combined Egyptian Hermetic and Chaldean practices with Pythagorean-focused Platonism, his direct use of daemons was most likely Greek. The Greek daemons formed a vast network of spiritual presences, experienced very differently from how they are understood today. Demonic forces have permeated modern language, and now we use them to describe life experiences in an agnostic manner. Words such as eros, love, nike, victory, phobos, fear, dike, justice, harmonia, harmony, thantos, death, kratos, strength, taich, luck, hypnos, sleep, nemesis, retribution, eris, strife, charites, grace, ati, ruin, are just a few of these original personifications that have become part of everyday language. In ancient Greece, one would not say, "I love you," but rather, "we are engaging in eros," referring to the greatest daemon often depicted and glorified by Plato himself. This phrasing conveyed the experience of the presence of eros, love, and the demonic presence of its conscious agency. Within the divine arcana tarot, the demonic forces of the Greek tradition find renewed expression through the 40 small cards of the minor arcana. These cards symbolize the dynamic interplay of mundane forces, embodying the complex alchemy of nature's generative and transformative power. For example, the qualities of valor, swiftness, and strength, manifested in the 7, 8, and 9 of Wands, are personified through the Greek daemons, Alk, Horm, and Thrasos. Similarly, the experiences of peace, sorrow, and truce, represented by the 2, 3, and 4 of swords, are imbued with the spirits of Irene, Penthos, and Icaria. This synthesis is unique in our school, the product of extensive research that identifies precise alignments between the minor arcana and the archetypal energies embodied by these ancient demonic entities. In the tarot tradition, the minor arcana are often understood as representing mundane, or earthly forces rather than heavenly or purely spiritual ones. This interpretation aligns seamlessly with Iamblichus's conception of daemons as mediators between realms, forces that operate within the domain of human experience and the natural world. Each demonic essence corresponds to a planetary influence, linked to the zodiac through the geometric harmony of the Pythagorean pentagram. By following this system, first defined by Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers of the Golden Dawn, refined through Aleister Crowley's work on the Thoth Tarot, and further developed through our own contributions, we unveil a deeper cosmological structure. Within this framework, planets, zodiac signs, and daemons converge to articulate the manifold expressions of life's forces, offering profound insight into their interconnectedness. Theurgy provides the key to unlocking and transforming these demonic energies. Through ritual praxis, symbolic scrying, contemplative meditation, and integration, the theurgist engages with these forces to align them with the greater purpose of the cosmos, in service to the demiurgos. Each daemon possesses a dual nature, a spectrum of potentialities that must be consciously explored and harmonized. Consider Algae, the daemon represented in the Five of Cups, disappointment, associated with Mars and Scorpio. Algae embodies a generative tension between the material qualities of truth, destruction, and disciplined action, and the emotional intensity of Scorpio's passionate depths. When disappointment arises, it often presents as a confrontation with unvarnished truth, a moment of piercing clarity that evokes anger, sorrow, or a sense of injustice. This experience encapsulates one side of Algae, the generative force of disillusionment, exposing the raw emotional core of unmet expectations. Yet within this stark truth lies the potential for renewal. At the base of the card, as depicted in Crowley's Thoth Tarot, a wireframe butterfly symbolizes the transformative power inherent in the experience of disappointment. The seeming desolation of Mars and Scorpio gives way to its inverted qualities: righteous focus, emotional depth, and intense drive for regeneration. Algae, in her dual nature, embodies both the pain of disillusionment and the passion for rebirth, illuminating the profound interplay of destruction and creation that underpins the theurgic journey in the interaction with this demonic force of generation. Thus, the Divine Arcanic Tarot not only maps the forces of life, but also offers a pathway for their transcendence. By engaging with these demonic energies through the lens of theurgy, the practitioner can navigate the intricate balance between their dualities, transforming earthly struggles into stepping stones towards cosmic harmony.
Real liberation comes not from glossing over or repressing painful states of feeling, but only from experiencing them to the full. Carl Jung, Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. I gather up every spirit that is pure, and weave him into my vesture of flame. Aleister Crowley, The 25th Aether, The Vision and the Voice.
In the theurgic journey, engaging with the demonic forces transforms their inherent duality, neutralizing their opposing poles to empower a transcendent unity. These forces, within their generative and destructive aspects, represent the raw archetypal energies that animate existence. To work with them is not merely shadow work in the Jungian sense, but a profound alchemical process. By embracing their dual nature, the theurgist dissolves the opposition between light and dark, allowing both forces to coalesce in the ecstasy of wholeness. This act is not annihilation, but integration, a recovery of the soul's full potential. In this sacred endeavor, the theurgist records their encounter in the Liber Daemonium, a journal of psychic and spiritual transformation. For 10 days, corresponding to the decan of the zodiac aligned with each daemon, the practitioner immerses themselves in the energies as they manifest in their lived experience. This practice not only releases constellated psychic energy trapped in the unconscious, as Jung describes, but also transmutes it into a force aligned with the divine will. The imprisonment of demonic energies in the psyche is undone, liberating them from their reactive, fate-bound tendencies and redirecting them towards providence. This is the chrysopoeia, the golden work of transforming shadow into light. Each ritual encounter with the daemons deepens their integration, adding to the theurgist's reservoir of spiritual power. Over time, these energies cease to conflict and instead synergize, aligning with the practitioner's higher purpose. The daemons, now freed and purified, act as mediators between the finite self and the infinite divine, bridging the gap between human and cosmic archetypes. This work aligns the Theurgist with the middle path, a state of transcendence where dualities dissolve into unity. The opposition of creation and destruction, love and strife, light and shadow are no longer adversarial but mutually enhancing. This balance reflects the greater harmony of the cosmos, where all forces once polarized converge into their eternal dance of wholeness. In this way, theurgic practice becomes not only a recovery of the soul, but a reclamation of the demonic forces as allies in the sacred work of cosmic co-creation. Through their transmutation, the Theurgist partakes in the divine mystery, embodying the union of opposites and the ecstasy of eternal balance. Here is a compendium of demonic forces found within the minor arcana of our divine arcana tarot.
The minor arcana of the tarot. The demonic forces of generative experience. Fire, wands. Ace, source. Mundane force, dominion. Zodiacal placement, Mars in Aries. Demonic spirit, Kratos. Mundane force, virtue. Zodiacal placement, Sun in Aries. Demonic spirit, Arete. Mundane force, completion. Zodiacal placement, Venus in Aries. Demonic spirit, Telesphorus. Mundane force, strife. Zodiacal placement, Saturn in Leo. Demonic spirit, Eris. Mundane force, victory. Zodiacal placement, Jupiter in Leo. Demonic spirit, Nike. Mundane force, valor. Zodiacal placement, Mars in Leo. Demonic spirit, Alke. Mundane force, swiftness. Zodiacal placement, Venus in Sagittarius. Demonic spirit, Horms. Mundane force, strength. Zodiacal placement, Moon in Sagittarius. Demonic spirit, Thrasos. Mundane force, oppression. Zodiacal placement, Saturn in Sagittarius. Demonic spirit, Adrastea. Water cups, Ace, source. Mundane force, love. Zodiacal placement, Venus in Cancer. Demonic spirit, Eros. Mundane force, abundance. Zodiacal placement, Mercury in Cancer. Demonic spirit, Euthenia. Mundane force, luxury. Zodiacal placement, Moon in Cancer. Demonic spirit, Philotis. Mundane force, disappointment. Zodiacal placement, Mars in Scorpio. Demonic spirit, Algia. Mundane force, pleasure. Zodiacal placement, Sun in Scorpio. Demonic spirit, Hedoni. Mundane force, debauch. Zodiacal placement, Venus in Scorpio. Demonic spirit, Methe. Mundane force, indolence. Zodiacal placement, Saturn in Pisces. Demonic spirit, Ergia. Mundane force, happiness. Zodiacal placement, Jupiter in Pisces. Demonic spirit, Charites. Mundane force, satiety. Zodiacal placement, Mars in Pisces. Demonic spirit, Koros. Air, swords. Ace, source. Mundane force, peace. Zodiacal placement, Moon in Libra. Demonic spirit, Irene. Mundane force, sorrow. Zodiacal placement, Saturn in Libra. Demonic spirit, Penthos. Mundane force, truce. Zodiacal placement, Mundane Jupiter in Libra. Demonic spirit, Ekekira. Mundane force, defeat. Zodiacal placement, Venus in Aquarius. Demonic spirit, Typhoeus. Mundane force, science. Zodiacal placement, Mercury in Aquarius. Demonic spirit, Daedalus. Mundane force, futility. Zodiacal placement, Moon in Aquarius. Demonic spirit, Sisyphus. Mundane force, interference. Zodiacal placement, Jupiter in Gemini. Demonic spirit, Amphilogiae. Mundane force, cruelty. Zodiacal placement, Mars in Gemini. Demonic spirit, Hybris. Mundane force, ruin. Zodiacal placement, Sun in Gemini. Demonic spirit, 8. Earth discs. Ace source. Mundane force. change, zodiacal placement, Jupiter in Capricorn, demonic spirit, Janus, mundane force, works, zodiacal placement, Mars in Capricorn, demonic spirit, Ponos, mundane force, power, zodiacal placement, Sun in Capricorn, demonic spirit, Bia, mundane force, worry, zodiacal placement, Mercury in Taurus, demonic spirit, Oasis, mundane force, success, zodiacal placement, Moon in Taurus, demonic spirit, Bonus eventus, mundane force, failure, zodiacal placement, Saturn in Taurus, demonic spirit, Aporia, mundane force, prudence, zodiacal placement, Sun in Virgo, demonic spirit, Epiphron, mundane force, gain, zodiacal placement, Venus in Virgo, demonic spirit, Kairos, mundane force, wealth, zodiacal placement, Mercury in Virgo, demonic spirit, Plautos.
Emperor Julian, the debasing of the daemon, the polluting of humanity against the polytheistic Greeks.
I ought indeed to have obeyed the Delphic inscription, "Know thyself," and not have ventured to affront the ears of so great a man as yourself, for only to look you in the face when one meets your eye is no easy matter, and it is much less easy to try to rival you when you wake the harmony of your unfailing wisdom, seeing that if Pan roused the echoes with his shrill song, everyone would yield him place, yes, even though it were Aristeus himself, and when Apollo played the lyre, everyone would keep silence, even though he knew the music of Orpheus. For it is right that the inferior, insofar as it is inferior, should yield to the superior, that is, if it is to know what is appropriate to itself and what is not. Apocryphal letter to Iamblichus, Flavius Claudius Julianus.
Julian was the emperor of Rome, reigning from 361 to 363 AD, who patterned his rulership after the most respected Marcus Aurelius. This period followed the growing dominance of Christianity within Roman politics, an influence established and strengthened by his predecessors, Constantine the Great, Constantius II, and Constans. In the century leading up to Julian's reign, astrology, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, Stoicism, Mithraic theurgy, Roman and Egyptian polytheism, and Orphic religious practices were prominent throughout the Roman Empire. Of all the Neoplatonists followed, Iamblichus was the most influential. Julian's words reflect not only a profound respect for the wisdom and spiritual authority of Iamblichus, but also the humility of one who seeks to bridge the divine and the human through philosophy. His reference to the Delphic maxiom, "Know thyself," illuminates the deep Platonic and Neoplatonic current in his thought, where self-knowledge is the key to aligning the soul with the greater cosmic order. Julian's analogy between Pan's rustic music and Apollo's celestial harmony is a vivid expression of the hierarchical worldview of late Greco-Roman polytheism, where every being and force in the cosmos has its rightful place and role. Pan, a symbol of nature's untamed vitality, is celebrated, but must ultimately yield to Apollo, the divine orchestrator of reason and higher truth. This hierarchy is not a denial of the lesser, but an affirmation of the beauty of each part of its relation to the whole, a concept that Julian likely saw as under siege in the Christianized empire. Julian was committed to preserving the diverse and vibrant traditions of Roman polytheism. This commitment stemmed from a deep conviction that the traditional faiths, with their intricate rituals and philosophical underpinnings, were integral to Roman identity and well-being. In Julian's worldview, influenced deeply by Iamblichus's teachings, the philosopher is both a mediator and a harmonizer, much like Apollo himself. To know what is appropriate to itself and what is not is the task of every soul striving towards divinity, a task made possible only through philosophy and theurgy. Julian's differential tone, however, is not merely self-efficating. It is also a recognition of the cosmic law of the superior and the inferior, a dynamic he sought to restore in a world he believed had turned away from its ancient, harmonious roots. His reverence for Iamblichus, cast as a modern-day Orpheus or Apollo, mirrors his broader effort to resacralize the Roman Empire by reinvigorating the mysteries and the ancient gods. This letter, though apocryphal, encapsulates Julian's mission to awaken the echoes of polytheistic wisdom in a world increasingly silenced by a new, less pluralistic harmony. Julian's passion to re-establish polytheistic beliefs was deeply rooted in his conviction that the ancient traditions, enriched by the philosophical and theurgical insights of Iamblichean Neoplatonism, offered a more profound and harmonious framework for understanding the cosmos and the divine. The Christian Church that was incorporated into the Roman Empire and became aligned with imperial authority is commonly referred to as the Imperial or Nicene Church. To Julian, this specific dogmatized and politicized form of early Christianity represented a break from the sacred order of the world, replacing the nuanced hierarchy of the gods, spirits, and natural forces with a monolithic and exclusionary faith. This was, to Julian, not just a religious error, but a metaphysical and cultural calamity that severed humanity's connection to the divine through the natural world and the many intermediaries celebrated in polytheistic views. Iamblichus's influence on Julian cannot be overstated. Iamblichean Neoplatonism, as we have been teaching here in our central doctrine, emphasized theurgy, the practice of divine rituals, as the means to unite the soul with the divine. Julian saw this as the antidote to the abstract and dogmatic theology of imperial Christianity, which, in his view, suppressed the rich symbolic and ritual life of the ancient religions. By restoring theurgy and recentering the gods within public and private life, Julian sought to revive not only the intellectual and spiritual traditions of polytheism, but also the cultural practices that had bound communities together for centuries. Festivals, sacrifices, and oracles were not mere superstitions to Julian. They were the lifeblood of a civilization in harmony with its gods and the cosmos. Julian's reforms were ambitious. As emperor, he sought to create a polytheistic religious structure that could rival the organizational effectiveness of the imperial Christian political forebears. He reinstated the funding of temples, encouraged the re-establishment of traditional priesthoods, and envisioned a cohesive theological framework grounded in Neoplatonic philosophy. Julian attempted to reintegrate the diverse pantheons of gods into a unified religious vision, one that emphasized the supreme role of Helios, the sun god, as a symbol of divine unity and the source of all light and life. Helios, in Julian's theology, served as a counterpart to the Christian God, embodying a transcendent order without forsaking the richness of polytheistic diversity. However, Julian's efforts were met with fierce resistance. Imperial Christianity, by the time of his reign, had become deeply entrenched within the Roman Empire's political and social fabric. The imperial Christian bishops, well organized and influential, opposed his reforms with both theological arguments and practical measures. To Julian, this opposition was not merely political, it was a battle for the soul of the empire. He framed his struggle as one of restoration versus innovation, casting the imperial Christians as usurpers of an ancient and sacred order. In his writings, such as Against the Galileans, Julian articulated his critique of Christianity as a distortion of truth, accusing it of severing humanity from the divine multiplicity that allowed for personal and communal flourishing. Julian's tragic death during the Persian campaign in 363 CE marked the abrupt end of his polytheistic restoration. His successors swiftly dismantled his reforms, ensuring that imperial Christianity continued its ascendancy. Yet Julian's dream of a resurgent polytheistic world did not die with him. His writings, actions, and vision inspired later thinkers and mystics who saw in him a heroic defender of a lost spiritual order. For Julian, the fight to restore polytheism was not just about religion. It was about preserving a worldview where the divine, nature, and humanity existed in a sacred and inseparable unity, a vision he believed was essential to the flourishing of both the individual soul and the empire.
Jesus said, "Where there are three gods, they are gods. Where there are two or one, I am with him." Gospel of Thomas, saying 30.
Not all Christian faiths would have opposed the return to a more organic culture of diversity. Thomasian Christianity, as embodied in the Gospel of Thomas, and other early mystical traditions reflect a form of faith that harmonizes with Julian's ideals of self-knowledge, divine harmony, and the elevation of the soul through wisdom and direct communion with the divine. Unlike the more rigid orthodoxy emerging in the imperial church, this mystical Christianity embraced a spirituality that was inwardly focused and contemplative, aligning itself with the timeless quest for truth found in multiple religions and philosophical traditions. The quote above has been interpreted in many ways, but when looked at from a Platonic worldview of multiplicity and diversity, of the manifestations of the one, or the good, of Platonism, you can see Thomasian Christianity lean towards a respectful polytheism, or at least a henotheistic point of view. The Gospel of Thomas presents a vision of spiritual practice that transcends dogmatic boundaries, emphasizing the kingdom of God as a reality to be discovered within oneself, rather than imposed externally. Teachings such as the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth and people do not see it, invite seekers to perceive divinity in the world around them, fostering an openness to the diverse expressions of the sacred found in other faiths. Its lack of condemnation towards other religious practices or ideologies reflects a generosity of spirit, echoing the Neoplatonic vision of unity in diversity that Julian so deeply cherished. This Christianity, steeped in the teachings of inner awakening and the integration of opposites, shares significant parallels with the Platonic and mystery traditions that surrounded it. The Gospel of Thomas emphasizes the transformative power of gnosis, knowledge, urging individuals to seek wisdom through direct experience and introspection. This esoteric path resonates with Julian's admiration for the ancient mysteries, where enlightenment and self-realization were achieved through inner reflection and harmony with the cosmos. Aggression, polemics, and the discrediting of the religious thought of other faiths are completely absent from the Gospel of Thomas. Instead, its teachings reflect a profound respect for the universal truths shared across spiritual traditions. By placing the divine spark within each individual, it upholds the idea that spiritual liberation is available to all, regardless of creed or practice. In this sense, the Gospel of Thomas embodies a Christianity that could coexist with and even enrich Julian's vision of a pluralistic, spiritually vibrant empire. Its alignment with the Platonic mystery tradition speaks to a faith that does not seek to dominate but to integrate, offering a pathway to unity through wisdom and divine self-awareness. We cover this much more comprehensively in our training video on the Gospel of Thomas on our website and YouTube. Thus stated, the rise of late Roman Christian politics herald the end of an era marked by the luminous philosophical syncretism that had been the hallmark of the Greco-Roman world. This rich intellectual and spiritual fusion, where Greek philosophy, Roman pragmatism, and diverse cultural traditions interwove, was a celebrated period of inquiry and exploration. It fostered a worldview that embraced plurality, sought wisdom through dialogue, and valued the harmonious integration of diverse ideas about the divine, the natural world, and humanity's place within it. It is well known that there was a period known as the Five Good Emperors of Rome. The first two were Roman polytheists, while the last three, Hadrian, ruling between 117 and 138 CE, Antonius, Pius, ruling between 138 and 161 CE, and especially Marcus Aurelius, ruling between 161 and 180 CE, were followers of Stoic philosophy. This era epitomized the intellectual and spiritual richness of its time, the golden age of relative harmony, particularly during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, occurred centuries before the rule of Julian, who desperately sought to reestablish such a period. However, the ascendancy of Christianity, particularly in its institutionalized and politicized forms, brought about a profound shift. What had once been a fluid exchange of beliefs and philosophies became increasingly defined by exclusivity and dogma. The imperial Christian Church, later to be known as the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church after their split, sought to assert its authority as the singular arbiter of spiritual truth. The institutionalization of Christianity coincided with the division of the Roman Empire into the Western and Eastern empires, established formally by Emperor Diocletian in 285 CE. The East, centered in Constantinople, embraced Christianity more fully and would later evolve into the Byzantine Empire. The West, weakened by internal strife, economic decline, and external pressure, struggled to adapt to the sweeping changes brought by Christian dominance and political fragmentation. This transition created a schism in the collective psyche of humanity, a rupture whose reverberations are still deeply felt today. The suppression of polytheistic traditions and the marginalization of classical philosophical schools symbolize not only the loss of diverse spiritual perspectives, but also a narrowing of the cultural imagination. The once vibrant dialogue between reason and mythos, philosophy and ritual, was replaced by a dichotomy that pitted faith against reason, the sacred against the secular. This fracture, deeply integrated in the Western mind, continues to influence the way humanity approaches questions of meaning, identity, and the relationship between the individual and the cosmos. The echoes of this transformation are visible in ongoing tensions between tradition and modernity, religion and science, and unity and division in the spiritual and cultural fabric of the world.
A cry went out through late antiquity, "Great Pan is dead." Plutarch reported it in his On the Failure of the Oracles. Yet the saying has itself become oracular, meaning many things to many people of many ages. One thing was announced: nature had become deprived of its creative voice. It was no longer an independent living force of generativity. What had had soul lost it. Or lost was the psychic connection with nature. With Pan dead, so too was Echo. We could no longer capture consciousness through reflecting within our instincts. They had lost their light and fell easily to asceticism, following sheepishly without instinctual rebellion their new shepherd, Christ, with his new means of management. Nature no longer spoke to us, or we could no longer hear. The person of Pan, the mediator, like an ether who invisibly enveloped all natural things with personal meaning, with brightness, had vanished. When Pan is alive, then nature is too, so the owl's hoot is Athena, and the mollusk on the shore is Aphrodite. When Pan is dead, then nature can be controlled by the will of the new god, man, modeled in the image of Prometheus or Hercules, creating from it and polluting in it without a troubled conscience. As the human loses personal connection with a personified nature and personified instinct, the image of Pan and the image of the devil merge. Pan never died, say many commentators on Plutarch. He was repressed. Pan still lives. In the repressed, which returns, in the psychopathologies of instinct which assert themselves, as Rocher indicates, primarily in the nightmare, and its associated erotic, demonic, and panic qualities. James Hillman, A Blue Fire. In 357, Constantius II linked divination and magic in a piece of legislation, forbidding anyone from consulting a diviner, astrologer, or a soothsayer. Then, he listed augurs and seers, Chaldeans, magicians, and all the rest, who were to be made to be silent because the people called them malefactors. In the 4th century, Augustine labeled old Roman religion and its divinatory practices as magic and therefore illegal. Thereafter, legislation tended to automatically combine the two. Wikipedia. In AD 393 or 394, the Byzantine Emperor Theodosius outlawed the practice of ancient pagan religions and the Pan-Hellenic games, putting an end to the power of the oracle. The temples and statues of Delphi were subsequently destroyed. History.com.
The decline and ultimate eradication of polytheism during the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire marked one of the most significant shifts in religious and cultural history. The traditional polytheistic worldview, with its rich canvas of gods, rituals, and festivals, was steadily undermined as Christianity gained favor. This transition gained momentum under Emperor Constantine, who, through the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, legitimized Christianity and aligned it with imperial support. By the end of the 4th century, Emperor Theodosius I codified Christianity as the state religion and systematically outlawed polytheistic worship through decrees such as the Theodosian Code. These measures banned sacrifices, closed temples, and criminalized the public observance of traditional faiths. The dismantling of the polytheistic institutional framework was enforced through state power, leading to the repurposing or destruction of temples and the confiscation of their wealth. Once revered practices were stigmatized as heretical, signaling the comprehensive transformation of the religious landscape. This suppression extended into the intellectual and cultural realms, targeting the symbols and foundations of polytheistic tradition. The closure of institutions like the Academy in Athens by Justinian I in 529 CE represented a profound break with classical philosophy's roots in polytheistic thought. Temples and sacred sites were often desecrated or converted into churches, asserting Christian authority over the spiritual and cultural symbols of the past. Elements of polytheistic art, architecture, and ritual were adapted into Christian traditions, creating a veneer of continuity while reinterpreting their significance. Resistance to this shift persisted in isolated regions, and syncretic practices emerged as a means of preserving remnants of the old ways. However, the deliberate and systematic marginalization of polytheism ultimately consigned it to the margins of history. This period did not merely signify the ascendancy of Christianity, but also the calculated eradication of a worldview that had defined ancient civilizations for millennia. The Greek philosophical response, Plotinus, Porphyry, and the philosophical counteroffensive. As Christian apologists launch increasingly forceful arguments against Hellenistic religion and philosophy, targeting the ancient mystery traditions, the Orphic inheritance, and the legacy of Greek metaphysics, a powerful intellectual counter-response emerged from within the Neoplatonic school, most notably from Plotinus and his student Porphyry. Porphyry was the initial teacher of the great Iamblichus himself. These thinkers did not merely defend the old ways, they re-articulated them with a clarity and philosophical rigor that attempted to preserve the spiritual heart of the ancient world in the face of a rapidly expanding Christian empire. Plotinus, founder of Neoplatonism, synthesized the Platonic tradition into a comprehensive metaphysical vision of the soul's ascent to the One, challenging the increasingly literal and dogmatic interpretations offered by early church writers. Yet it was Porphyry, his student, editor, and biographer, who most directly engaged with the Christian challenge. Porphyry stands as one of the greatest scholars of late antiquity, a philosopher, historian, philologist, and mystic whose range of knowledge included not only Plato and Aristotle, but also Pythagorean, Orphic, Chaldean, and Eastern sources. His writings extended the Neoplatonic project into polemics, metaphysics, theology, and ritual theory. In particular, Porphyry's now lost Against the Christians, Versus Christianos, was a pointed and extensive critique of Christian doctrine, historiography, and spiritual interpretation. He questioned the historicity of biblical figures, the contradictions within Christian texts, and the intellectual break Christianity posed with the philosophical tradition. So powerful and direct was Porphyry's critique of Christianity that it provoked one of the earliest and most aggressive campaigns of literary suppression in Western history. His treatise Against the Christians, written likely between 270 and 300 CE, spanned 15 books and took aim at the theological foundations, scriptural inconsistencies, and historical claims of the emerging Christian faith. Unlike other critics of the time, Porphyry did not resort to mockery or satire. Instead, he offered a sober, rigorous, and highly informed analysis of Christian doctrines, especially focusing on the departure from reason, the rejections of classical philosophy, and what he perceived as their dangerously literal misreadings of texts meant to be interpreted allegorically or mystically. Porphyry argued that Christianity represented not the culmination of philosophy, but its distortion. He scrutinized the figure of Jesus as he was portrayed in the Imperial Church's Orthodox canon, challenged the reliability and authorship of Christian scriptures, and dismantled prophetic claims by pointing out chronological and logical contradictions in the biblical texts. Most threatening to the Church was his use of philosophical reasoning rooted in the Platonic tradition to expose what he considered the irrationality and historical fabrication within Christian teachings. He treated the Bible as literature to be analyzed rather than as divine revelation to be accepted uncritically, a revolutionary stance for the time. The Christian authorities, already gaining institutional power by the 4th century, regarded Porphyry's treatise not simply as a scholarly rebuttal, but as a dangerous undermining of the faith at a time when Christianity was becoming intertwined with imperial authority. By the early 5th century, with Christianity now the official religion of the Roman Empire, the threat posed by against the Christians was deemed intolerable. In 435 CE, under the rule of Emperor Theodosius II, a formal edict was issued that explicitly ordered the destruction of porphyries against the Christians. The decree commanded that all copies of the text be gathered and burned, and that anyone found possessing or distributing it would face severe punishment. The act was part of a broader campaign by the imperial church to silence what it called heretical or pagan literature, a campaign that would lead to the loss of vast swaths of ancient philosophical, religious, and mystical writings. Despite the near-complete destruction of the work, Porphyry's argument lived on indirectly, preserved ironically by his opponents. Church fathers such as Methodius, Eusebius of Caesarea, Latinius, and Augustine were forced to address Porphyry's challenges in their own writings, often quoting or paraphrasing parts of the very text they condemned. In doing so, they inadvertently left behind fragments of Against the Christians, embedded within their refutations. These scattered remnants give us glimpses of the depth and tone of Porphyry's arguments, revealing a thinker who not only understood Christian doctrine thoroughly, but who also sought to confront it with the full weight of philosophical inquiry, historical analysis, and religious pluralism. The erasure of Porphyry's work reflects more than censorship. It represents a turning point in the history of Western thought. With the alignment of religious power and imperial law, the Christian Church began to define orthodoxy not through debate, but through exclusion, often enforced with fire. The destruction of Against the Christians marked the beginning of a systematic effort to suppress dissenting voices, especially those of the classical philosophical tradition that sought to preserve a vision of the cosmos rooted in unity, harmony, and metaphysical assent, one incompatible with the emerging Christian theological structure. In the case of Porphyry, the attempted silencing of his voice only underscores his importance. The very fact that his writings were banned and burned attests to the weight they carried and the threat they posed. Though most of his words have been lost, the shadow of his thought continues to loom behind the texts of those who tried to bury him.
The purpose of the Church was to save souls from the demonic powers of a world fallen under the power of Satan. Yet Christian demons were the daemons of Neoplatonic theurgy, agents of the demiurge in cosmogenesis. Neoplatonic theurgists entered divine activity by honoring these daemons as portals to the macrocosm. This was the first step that allowed the gods to reveal themselves as human, and for theurgists to take the shape of the gods. All sacrifices, all forms of divination, and every oracle revered by Neoplatonic theurgists must be understood against the background of a divine cosmos whose creation they shared. This was not the vision of the Church, and as its power grew and its persecutions increased, theurgists were forced to withdraw from public worship and perform their rituals as a secret community of pious philosophers. Gregory Shaw, Hellenic Tantra.
As Gregory Shaw points out, the daemons of Neoplatonic theurgy, intermediaries and agents of divine activity, were recast as demons, malevolent forces serving Satan. This reinterpretation severed the profound connection between humanity and the divine cosmos, reducing what had once been seen as sacred and participatory into a fearful dichotomy of good and evil. The Church's growing political and social power enabled it to enforce its vision of a world fallen under Satan's dominion. Polytheistic gods and goddesses, central to the theurgical practices of the Neoplatonists, were demonized, their rituals condemned as sorcery, and their temples either destroyed or appropriated for Christian worship. Sacred sites like the Oracle of Delphi, which had been venerated for over a millennium, were desecrated and abandoned. The Neoplatonic vision of a cosmos alive with divine presence, where humanity played an integral role in sustaining and understanding the sacred order, was declared heretical. The cultural genocide that followed led to the systematic obliteration of polytheistic religious texts, rituals, and knowledge, a loss that has reverberated through history. It is widely accepted that the majority of ancient literature has been lost. Estimates suggest that as much as 90% of all classical works have not survived to modern times. This is due to a combination of factors including wars, natural decay, changes in cultural priorities, and deliberate destruction. When Brian Murarescu, the author of The Immortality Key, asked the main museum curator in Greece what percent of classical literature escaped the Great Destruction, she told him less than 1%. She pointed to the early Christian zealots as the main reason. The deliberate destruction of classical literature by the early Christian zealots was an intentional aspect of the Church's consolidation of power, targeting texts that it viewed as threats to its theological authority. Polytheistic temples, often repositories of ancient wisdom, became primary targets. The Temple of Seriphus in Alexandria, for example, was destroyed in 391 CE under orders aligned with Emperor Theodosius I's edicts, resulting in the loss of countless texts associated with Greco-Roman religious and philosophical traditions. Libraries like those in Antioch and Alexandria were ravaged or fell into neglect, and their treasures were either burned or abandoned as polytheistic knowledge was systematically suppressed. Religious zeal fueled a campaign against heretical texts. Edicts such as those issued by Theodosius II mandated the destruction of writings deemed incompatible with Christian doctrine, including those of the Neoplatonists and philosophers like Democritus and Epicurus, whose materialist ideas contradicted the Church's teachings. Ritual texts and esoteric works, including portions of the Hermetica, were lost or only selectively preserved if they could be reframed within the Christian mystical context. Even figures like Hypatia, a prominent philosopher and mathematician, were violently silenced, symbolizing the broader suppression of polytheistic intellectual traditions. While deliberate destruction played a significant role in the cultural loss of antiquity, it was not the sole cause. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire, natural disasters, and the fragility of ancient materials like papyrus contributed to the loss. However, the intentional obliteration of texts and traditions by Christian authorities greatly compounded the devastation. The Church's efforts to eliminate polytheistic influence extended beyond physical destruction to an ideological campaign that erased much of the intellectual and spiritual heritage of the ancient world. The resulting void in cultural continuity profoundly shaped the trajectory of Western civilization, leaving modern scholars to reconstruct fragments of a once vast and interconnected body of knowledge. This enforced erasure was more than physical, it was psychological. By turning the rich archetypes of polytheistic spirituality into symbols of evil, the Church fundamentally altered the human's relationship with the unconscious. The gods and daemons, once honored as aspects of the divine, were cast into the shadow, repressed and feared. As Shaw emphasizes, this drove theurgic practices underground, forcing philosophers and practitioners into secrecy, and for the greater population it became a horrific repression. What could no longer be celebrated openly persisted in hidden corners of the collective psyche, where it would later re-emerge in altered forms, such as Renaissance magic, mysticism, and eventually modern psychoanalytic explorations of the unconscious, especially those of Jung. Libraries were burned, temples filled with scrolls were destroyed, and countless works of literature and philosophy were lost forever. The Roman Empire, home to a population of 75 million across its vast territories, saw its polytheistic and pluralistic culture reduced to a single, rigid path of belief. Where once the cosmos was perceived as an interconnected web of divinity, humanity, and nature, it was now recast as a battleground of salvation and damnation. Yet even in its suppression, the spirit of polytheism endured, hidden in the rituals of folk traditions, in the esoteric practices of mystics, in the very language of Christianity itself, which, as we have explained, absorbed and repurposed so many elements of the polytheistic worldview.